I'm Babla Jonathan, and this is the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Équinoxe Television, live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. Thanks for joining us today. In our top stories in this edition of the news, insecurity continues rising in several parts of the Republic of Cameroon. Suspected bandits are terrorizing the population in the day, in the night, at all times, and almost everywhere. We will bring to you details on the efforts of the National Gendarmerie and other security and defense forces to crush the head of insecurity in the Republic of Cameroon, while the government and Equatorial Guinea are equally stepping up efforts to put an end to cross-border insecurity, to jointly fight cross-border insecurity along the over 300-kilometer borderline between the two countries. The two countries have signed an agreement in this perspective. Insecurity remains a major problem in the big cities and the hinterlands in the Republic of Cameroon. Inhabitants of different parts of the country are recurrently attacked by suspected armed bandits in these at close intervals of time. In the meantime, the National Gendarmerie has been stepping up the fight against insecurity. We have details in this report compiled by Smart Jikan Gabriel.
On the 26th of June 2020, Équinoxe TV aired a report in which a gang of 3 visited a residence in Suza, raped 2 women, inflicted wounds, and made away with several items alongside the sum of close to 170,000 francs CFA. Investigations led by the company commander of the Gendarmerie Mbanga, Esaga Bonaventure, and the brigade commander of Nkapa led to the arrest of the 3 alleged bandits alongside their accomplice in the crime. Their presentation at the Nkapa Gendarmerie Brigade this Wednesday made some of their victims to recall the pains they went through in their hands.
I
wanted to relax after a tiring day at an off license. As I left the place, on my way back, one of them caught me and slapped me, after which they collected my cell phone and money which I had worked the whole day. The man, who is blamed to have contacted the alleged bandit to Suza, refutes the allegations. I don't know them. Ask them if they have ever seen me. It's lies. They say I brought them here to Suza to steal from my wife. It's impossible. But the leader of the gang, Dim Jean Calvin, says it was Binche Jean Charles who called them to attack his wife. He told us about a woman who sells table oil and said she was having 4 million francs in her keeping. We missed on the first day. Among the items caught in the keeping of these alleged bandits who were arrested was an M21 war weapon with 2 charges and 42 ammunitions, a dagger, a motorcycle, 2 cell phones, and a large packet of marijuana. In Buda, at a locality known as Mbu, 3 alleged armed bandits who have been terrorizing the population have again fallen into the dragnet of the brigade commander of Mbuda, Lashlele Sebastien. After the presentation at the premises of the Gendarmerie in Buda, the 3 alleged bandits were taken to the area they recently attacked before their arrest. It was another big win for the Gendarmerie.
We are presenting these other group of bandits who have been creating so much disorder in this area. From there you can understand that we still have some people who have taken upon themselves not to allow our brothers and sisters to live in peace. And to those ones, we have just one message for them, that the National Gendarmerie will not sleep unless there is total the people whose lives and properties are entrusted in our hands, unless those people are sleeping in peace. So we are outside and will continue to do that.
It was in the same zone that gendarmes recently caught another group of gang at their hideout, which was also serving as a training ground for them. The men in uniform have promised that there will be no hideout for the men of the underworld in Buda.
In the far north region of the Republic of Cameroon, Kolofata in the Mayosava division is one of the areas badly affected by recurrent attacks, killing of persons and even animals, and destruction of properties by Boko Haram terrorists. And after 5 years of bloodshed, destruction in that part of the country, there is a relative calm there, and some inhabitants are now returning home. Details in this report by Innocent Aze.
Of the 47 municipalities of the far north region of Cameroon, Kolofata has suffered most attacks orchestrated by the Islamic sect Boko Haram, with considerable loss of life and material damage to basic infrastructures at the tune of billions of francs CFA. Government should kindly watch our backs, relentlessly keep eyes on the red zones, because we always have surprises from this group. With life gradually returning, the returned inhabitants who had escaped Boko Haram attacks and lootings desire to recover from the health and economic shock. This follows destruction of their markets, with more than 300 shops burned across this municipality. Here, the population, deprived from their activities, lack capital to bounce back into business that will enable them generate income for their basic needs. There is nothing to eat. We struggle before children have something to eat. Our children are forced to sell firewood before they can buy food. If the firewood is not bought, you will starve, same as parents. Clothing is another issue. Children don't have clothes to wear. Without hospitals, schools and good roads, the newly installed mayor and his deputies, who do not have their own source of income, usually derived from local and municipal taxes, still do not have a franc and resources that the government must transfer to decentralized territorial communities. Resumption of border activities will boost reconstruction of our community in particular and the far north region in general. We will be able to rehabilitate our roads, especially the deplorable state of our national roads linking our communities. We will also re-establish supply of electricity, which has been lacking for about 5 years.
Fédérateur de développement que nous ne peut pas mettre de côté si on veut réellement amorcer une reconstruction.
Installed in their functions, the new executive took oath to renew face of a town that collected revenue of more than 3 million francs CFA annually.
Nous sommes bloqués à ce niveau.
That though with the financial challenge, they will first endeavor to realize the aforementioned major projects with hope of government's financial support.
Comme je viens de les citer, c'est-à-dire les écoles, les centres de santé, ainsi de suite, ainsi de suite.
Economically stricken like the northwest and southwest regions, elites of Kolofata and the far north in general are now hoping to see the reconstruction plan of this region, devastated for more than 5 years by Boko Haram, realized.
Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea have signed an agreement that will henceforth govern the security and defense cooperation between the two countries. The agreement contains joint action modalities on cross-border security. It comes after a 2-day closed-door ministerial level meeting in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea's capital. The delegations from both countries met to consolidate and conclude proceedings that started last month in Yaoundé, capital of Cameroon, aimed at strengthening cross-border defense and security along the 300-kilometer border line separating the two countries. Equatorial Guinea had often closed its borders with her neighbor Cameroon, complaining of security threats caused by illegal immigration. Some highlights of the agreement published by the Communication Department of the Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Cameroon include exchange of information and intelligence, the fight against all forms of illegal cross-border activities, joint protection of the land, sea and air spaces of the two countries, prioritization of dialogue in the resolution of cross-border problems, implementation of dispositions of the protocols and military or the patrols and military exercises by forces stationed on both sides of the border between the countries, and the right for the forces to carry out cross-border tracking of criminals. Now coming up in the northwest, or rather in the southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, we're going to show you another phase of the ugly situation on National Road number 16. And inhabitants of localities along the road in the southwest region of the country are suffering. They are lamenting over the difficulties that they are facing because of the bad state of the road. For me, I'm Strong Sander.
Another phase, another story of the National Road number 16, Lumkumba. Along the unbearable 35-kilometer stretch are villages and localities such as Tombel, Ebonji, Mungo River and Bangone villages, whose inhabitants are principally farmers. They do well in bananas, plantains and maize farming, but have remained socio-economically down because of one common and a major problem.
We are suffering too much. We are the farmer in the Bonji. The way of transportation of the food, we suffer too much. The way we are suffering, my brother, you can have pity on us. So the way of transportation to bring the food in the market. So people come right to Bangone.
The road is too bad. Even to come here, we cannot even walk to come here. We are struggling a lot to come here. So we beg our allies to help me to grade our roads.
They should even grade the road, even through gravel, so that vehicles can be coming. At times we will be a week without seeing even a vehicle in our area.
Farming being the main source of livelihood in the area, where there are no roads to get crops to the market, the farmers and villagers like those of Bangone consider hard options.
Bangone, Etam, Ebonji, people use their bikes. Some of us, we use canoe to bring our food to Mongo. So when we bring the transportation matter is very expensive for us. You know, we pay people inside the bush before we bring the plantain beside the water, because we have no good roads.
We are trying to buy plantain in Etambe. There is bad road. We don't have vehicle to come and take us here. So it is Okada who is carrying us. We are struggling to buy.
But once in markets like the Mungo River market, the prices of their goods are again dictated by the bad road.
That is why our crops are not sold in a good price. At times we bring plantains in the market. You see a big bunch of plantains like this one. They are offloading from the canoe. You see a very big bunch, they take it for 2,000. That's because of the bad road. So we are really suffering in this area.
A situation that places farmers and buyers on strained relations.
So when we bring the food now, the buyers are too complicated. So we bring the food, they are complaining the food is not all right, but they are going to Douala, they are selling in a very good price. When they come here, they just buy anything that they give to you, you just take the money, because we don't have any way that you can carry the food back.
Buyers, mainly from the city of Douala, say they are obliged to pay over 150,000 francs CFA for truck drivers to get their goods to Douala because of the worsening state of the road. Before now, the cost of getting a truckload of plantains or bananas to Douala was at 80,000 francs CFA, according to buyers.
Many councils in the northwest and southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon have been shut down by the 4-year-long Anglophone crisis. Many of those functioning are doing so with lots of difficulties. And in the southwest region, the regional president of the United Councils and Cities of Cameroon, Boko Patrick Anki, has called on the mayors of the region to strengthen collaboration between their respective council areas in order to reap the fruits of decentralization being accelerated, whose implementation is being accelerated by the government. Derek Jato reports.
It is widely believed west of the Mongo that if there was an effective decentralization, maybe there might not have been anything like the Anglophone crisis. But because every major decision was and is still coming from Yaoundé, sparked this fire at home, which all started in stages. From the peaceful protest, the repression, the destruction.
To my left, a car is on fire, and to my right, a church is being attacked. The angry protesters are saying that they want dialogue now, and they are not ready to back down.
Which has graduated into a full-scale war today.
We are at the Menji main market, the economic epicenter of the Bialem division, but it is empty. There's no sign of life here. We have seen all the business premises closed. We have not even seen people to ask them why. But this place is as quiet as a graveyard.
And it was at this stage that the government admitted that something was not right. The Ministry of Decentralization and Local Development is created, and to prove a point, the announcement was made that a reasonable percent of the budget will be sent to the councils, a giant step by the government in the decentralization and local development process. And these are the agents of the decentralization, the mayors. But in the southwest region, the doors of councils that are open in their various municipalities can be counted. The war is still on, and the separatist fighters are yet to be convinced, reason why they are still chasing the municipal authorities and their vision out of their municipalities. Today, the 33 mayors of the southwest region are converging on Boya, the southwest regional capital, for an elective general assembly. The heat is still on, but there is always a way out.
I want the mayors of the southwest region to work as a family, so that with the present disposition of the socio-political climate in the region, together we can sort for solutions.
Mayor Boko Patrick Anki, mayor of the Kombo Abedimo Council in the Bakassi Peninsula, who was re-elected as the Southwest Regional President of the United Councils and Cities of Cameroon, called on his peers of the region for teamwork in order to be able to show to their various municipalities that change is coming.
I want to first of all thank God for this new mandate.
And in the days ahead, he will be leading the Southwest delegation for the national election in Yaoundé. The National Bureau of the United Councils and Cities of Cameroon was represented by Mayor John Donatus.
And circulation between the on the bridge linking the Nyong and Kele division and the Senegal Maritime division in the center and littoral regions of the country respectively has been interrupted for 4 days now due to a truck that is stuck on the Kele bridge. That the truck was transporting wood from Mesondo. Local inhabitants say the situation has slowed down economic activities, as Makuli Fogo reports.
The Lone Bridge linking Songa, Sonkomondo, Somapan, Bangsombi, Ndokchiak, localities in the Nyoankele Division, Central Region, to Puma, in the Sanaga Maritime Division, Littoral region of Cameroon, impassable for the past 4 days. A heavy-duty truck transporting wood from Mesondo got stuck on the Kele Bridge. According to local inhabitants, the situation has resulted to a slowdown in economic activities. We are suffering now. There is no other road linking the two regions. Due to the situation, transport fare has increased. The coming of the rain has made circulation extremely difficult. Due to the roadblock, motorcycle riders have now adopted risky methods in order to be able to cross the bridge. Now that the road has been blocked, we are now adopting new techniques in order to be able to ply on the bridge. I recently got my hands bruised. Sometimes some road users fall into the river while trying to cross the bridge. Locals blame owners of heavy-duty trucks who ply the road regularly for the collapsed portion of the bridge. They say administrative officials of both regions have remained silent to the situation despite their cry. The driver of the heavy-duty truck is set to be on the run.
And out of Cameroon, Madagascar's public health minister sent out an urgent request for help to partner agencies and health institutions as COVID-19 cases are increasing in the country. There have been reports that public hospitals in Madagascar are at full capacity and will only admit severe cases of COVID-19. The island nation currently has about 7,000 COVID-19 cases, and President Andry Rajoelina early this month reimposed a lockdown on the capital following a rise in the number of persons tested positive for coronavirus. Talking Point is up next. Thanks for staying with us in Talking Point. Our guest today is joining us from South Africa, Professor Henry Famundam is a pharmaceutical care and public health expert with several years of experience working in many African countries in the areas of academia and public health programs. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you for inviting me once more.
The government of Cameroon has decided to introduce a vaccine against cervical cancer and other genital infections in the enlarged vaccination program within the framework of the 2015-2020 multi-annual vaccination plan, and the campaign will start on September 23, 2020, and among other strategies, vaccination in schools would be implemented. And of course, the campaign targets 339,908 young girls of age 9 across the national territory. And this information is contained in a release signed by the Secretary of State at the Ministry of Basic Education, Ashiri Kilo. Professor, what do you think about this vaccination against cervical cancer and other genital infections?
The human papilloma virus is something that has been very common globally and has been known to be the causative agent for most of the cervical cancers that we have in women. In countries like Cameroon, cervical cancer will be probably the second most prevalent cancer that you have in women after breast cancer. But generally speaking, the HPV vaccine, which is called Gardasil, has been around, was approved since 2006, and it was a very welcome public health intervention globally. So it's a very necessary intervention, but it's an intervention that must accompany what we call stakeholder engagement. You have to be able to engage the parents, engage the population, because you're giving it to children, which requires that the parents have to be comfortable and the population has to be comfortable. While I agree totally that it's a very welcome public health intervention, the process is equally as important as the intervention.
Now, you seem to have indicated earlier that this vaccine, the introduction of this vaccine is not timely. Why do you think that is not timely?
Well, I don't think it's a de novo or brand new introduction in Cameroon, because the vaccine had been piloted in Cameroon in 2014. And so this, it showed very good results. The uptake was good. The acceptability was generally good. So I think what the government is trying to do now is to make sure that the general population can benefit from it. But in enlarging and making sure that the uptake is general countrywide, in the midst of a COVID-19, which is an emergency, and COVID-19 which has brought about so many anxieties because of the fact that there's no treatment, because of the fact that there's a lot of behavior change that is required with this disease. So it's an emergency. And so introducing the idea of an HPV vaccine for general uptake when people are already very nervous, very anxious with COVID, I think the timing is not the optimal timing because we need to be able to make sure that we have the COVID-19 under control. And there are a lot of questions, and rightly so, that the population and the general public is asking about COVID-19, and they're going to be asking the same kind of questions about the HPV vaccine, which means it's a double whammy for the adults, for the parents who are going to be giving consent for the children. So to me, the timing is not very optimal, but I'm sure they must have a reason for that. But in my view, the timing is a little bit off.
Professor, there are lots of worries. There are people, including some medical experts, who are expressing some worries about the administration of this vaccine against cervical cancer, which will be administered on young girls of age 9. What can explain this fear and uncertainty of parents?
Right. The uncertainty for parents, it's very clear, it's very understood. The drug is actually approved, Gardasil is approved to be used in girls and boys, by the way, from the age of 9 to 45. Now, and that's the other thing which I think it needs to be thought about properly, because it's no longer given only to girls, it's also given to boys. Because Gardasil, which is the HPV vaccine, it's known to prevent 6 different types of cancers. There's the cancer of the cervix, which is the most common in girls and women in all over the world, and in Cameroon especially. It's also prevents cancer of the vagina, cancer of the vulva, cancer of the anal cancer, and for boys, it does prevent for cancer of the penis, also cancer of the anus for boys, and most important, that has come up now with a welcome intervention in public health, is that it prevents cancer of the head and the neck. And so it's something that is generally accepted now that you give it to boys and girls. Now, but to answer your question specifically, is that you need parental consent if you're going to give it to girls at that age. And that parental consent has to be determined by the Ministry of Public Health, which again, this is something that when you do in most of the countries, you have to set up an advisory group. The advisory group is going to involve gynecologists, oncologists, pharmaceutical people, and a number of people that will be able to look at this and determine exactly how do you want to manage it, and how do you get the stakeholder engagement so that you can answer a lot of the questions that parents would have. It's very natural, very normal that the parents are going to be anxious. You answer their questions, and the questions are usually, if you give it to someone who's 11 years, 12 years old, you have to explain to them Are you therefore encouraging them that they could have a sexual debut at that age? So that makes the patient very nervous, or the parents very nervous. You have to answer, what are the side effects? Do they have any long-term repercussions, any long-term side effects and that is going to occur in their children? And as parents, that's going to be the major concern, and the stakeholder engagement, which should be countrywide, should be able to make sure that the parents are comfortable by answering all of these questions.
Professor, you have been talking about the positive side, the positive impact of the vaccine on the human health, on the human system. But what about some negative reactions, some negative manifestations that it could provoke in the human system? Because this is the area where many parents and even some health experts are raising concerns, because we have seen situations where some vaccines have been administered on children and either the head becomes swollen or there are other manifestations that are not very good.
Okay. So Jonathan, this is not a brand new vaccine. This is not a clinical trial. This vaccine was approved since 2006. Which means the clinical trials have been taking place way before that. So there's a lot of experience with this vaccine, which spans over 15 years to 20 years. And so there have been a lot of side effects that have been documented. The side effects that are commonly known, which we know very well, would be pain at the injection site. It's very common. But the one that most people are concerned about is that you're giving it to anybody, the person has to be seated or lying down and rest for like 15-20 minutes, because the patient becomes dizzy. And so a lot of the side effects that we have are very mild side effects. However, there's a couple of patients that have reported some really serious side effects, up to having seizures. Now, when you do side effects, which is what you call pharmacovigilance, there's a way that you classify pharmacovigilance. Was it an adverse event, which means something bad happened to the patient while they were taking the medication? But is it directly the cause of the medication? We call those ones adverse events because we may not be able to link it to the exact adverse reaction. Now, adverse reaction themselves is when you have a causality, a linkage to the medication itself. And so based on that, the ones that we've had so far are very mild, a little headache, pain at the injection site. So based on that, generally speaking, for this long that we've used the medication, it's considered to be generally safe. Now, medicine is not an exact science. Are there going to be someday, 20 years from today, maybe the effects of the vaccine, 20 years? Well, we don't know, but it's all pointing to the fact that everything looks very good now for the experience that we've had for 15 to 20 years, given when the clinical trials were being conducted. We don't have any serious adverse reaction. Some of the very few that have been reported, it's been called adverse events, which means there's no direct linkage with the medication itself.
What are some of the medical measures or guidelines that should be respected, that should be put in place to mitigate the adverse effects, to reduce the margin of negative effects of the vaccine on those who received the vaccine, that is youngers of age 9?
Well, it's very clear. The first thing is that you educate the parents, and then before you give the vaccine to a child, you have to also counsel them. They have to be mentally ready, and you tell them that some of the basic side effects that they may feel, you tell them in advance. That number one, you're going to feel pain at the injection site. Number two, your hand may become numb. Number three, you're going to feel dizzy, so I'm going to ask you to lie down after you receive the injection so that you don't feel that dizzy. And like I said, there have been a couple of very few that have reported patients having twitching, almost like a seizure-like, but it goes away. And so based on all of that, that's how you normally would prepare anybody for taking a vaccine or any other medication. And that's what pharmacovigilance is all about, in terms of how do you prepare the patient for the side effects that they're going to have. And by the way, when we talk deeply about pharmacovigilance, you will know that medications like aspirin that you take every day, Panadol that you take every day, they have very serious side effects, which people overlook at it because they have the medications everywhere in the drug shops that you go, in the markets that you go, you can buy them. But there are people that, for example, penicillin has killed quite a good number of people. So there are a number of things that you have to do. Make sure that this is what we call the stakeholder engagement. The parents are well informed. The health community, if you're going to be giving this, the people that are administering this, the nurses, the doctors, are well trained on telling the patients what their expectations are. And when all of this comes together, then it's usually a very successful campaign. But I must mention something, Jonathan, the fact that a lot of people also have the notion that it could be the entity, Gardasil, for example. They're not sure what is actually the chemical content of the vaccine. This is something that, for public health communication, the Ministry of Health should be able to allay their fears. Tell them that this is what the vaccine is made up of, this is how it works, this is the right chemical. The Ministry of Health has put it through their quality assurance department, and it's the right chemical that we need to prevent the children from having any kind of cancer. So the communication part of it, the stakeholder engagement, is equally as important as the administration of the vaccine.
And the administration of the vaccine sometimes is hindered by resistance on the part of the parents. In some few words, what will you advise the parents to do with regards to the upcoming vaccination campaign starting on the 23rd of September 2020?
Well, what I'm going to advise the parents is probably starting with not just advising the parents, but advising the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, and I hope the Ministry of Youth is going to be involved in all of this, the Ministry of Women's Affairs, is to be able to have proper guidelines that are very easy to read and understand, and then have phone numbers that any parent should be able to call and have their questions answered to their satisfaction. And that there should be no coercion. You shouldn't force any parent to be able to agree to it. And then most parents, actually, even in the US, 25% of the parents do not accept it at the very first time. They will go home, read over it, ask questions, and then they get comfortable and come back and be able to take the vaccine. So what I would advise them is that whatever questions that you have, write them down. And I'm hoping that there's going to be somebody at the level of your sub-district or your district to be able to answer these questions. And that's how it should be. The communication is very important. All parents have to have access to a properly trained nurse or medical doctor or pharmacist that is meant to answer every single question to give them confidence. Because the anxiety from parents is expected and it's very normal.
All right, Professor Henry Famundem, you are a pharmaceutical care expert, and right now we're going to talk about pharmacovigilance. When we're talking about pharmacovigilance, what exactly are we referring to?
So pharmacovigilance is it's a very compound word. Pharmaco usually just means the drug. Vigilance it's just what the word is, that we have to be vigilant about the medication that we take. And that's because every single medication that we take that's available in the world, in Cameroon, everywhere, has side effects. And so we are constantly working on ensuring that the benefits outweigh the risk of every medication that you take. That whole process is called pharmacovigilance, where you report side effects. Now, the pharmacovigilance, globally speaking, in Africa, the pharmacovigilance is the least developed in the African countries, which means Cameroon inclusive, which means we don't have a system in place where we continue to monitor all the medications that we take and see whether do they have a right to continue to be in the market. And it even goes as far as helping you if you have a proper pharmacovigilance program to identify what you would call counterfeit medications. So it's a national program which is usually decentralized, maybe to the different regions, to make sure that all the medications that we're using, we're able to document any side effects. And if we see that a particular medication has a lot of side effects, that is cause for concern. And you're able to now report to the Ministry of Health and say this particular drug or batch number is causing a lot of, for example, seizures, or patients are fainting, or whatever side effects that the patients are having. Because once more, every medication that we have has side effects. And so just to conclude on this introductory part of it, there are about 10,000 people walking around the world who have no arms and no legs. This is because of the failure or lack of pharmacovigilance in the 1962s and around the early 1960s, which there was a drug called thalidomide. That drug was tested in animals and there was no problem. But when you gave it to humans, when the women became pregnant, it stopped the arms and the legs from developing. So you now have these individuals, there are about 10,000 of them in the world, that have no legs, no arms because of a drug effect. So based on that, the world at large put on a very, very robust, very aggressive pharmacovigilance, except in the African continent that our pharmacovigilance is very weak. So to me, we're still probably at the 1960s level of pharmacovigilance.
Professor, what are the shortcomings of the pharmacovigilance system in African countries?
Well, the shortcoming is that a lot of them, of course, are aware of pharmacovigilance. A lot of them know about it. A lot of them know they should be doing it. And so what they have done is, in most of the countries that I've worked, some of them are quite developed or making a lot of progress. Some of them have somebody sitting at a desk who takes reports on side effects. And that is not well structured. That's not well managed. And there's no way you're going to be able to pick up side effects in your country, because adverse drug reactions, what they've been doing is dependent on the US, on the UK, on the European countries to be able to say, if this country is reporting this adverse drug reaction to a drug that is in Cameroon, then we'll just take it from them. But it doesn't quite work that way. The way adverse drug reactions work is dependent on a number of factors. It's dependent on your healthcare personnel, how much training they've had. Are they making any medication errors? Because medication errors, even in countries like in the US, would cause a lot of adverse drug reaction, which is part of pharmacovigilance. And a lot of patients die from medication errors, even in countries like in the US. So how more of an African country that has very weak pharmacovigilance system? And so the weakness of the pharmacovigilance system weakens the quality of care, quality of treatment that you're giving the patients in the country. And so that makes it very, very challenging. And so it needs to be strengthened like overnight. It needs to be strengthened immediately, because it's a major weakness in your medication process, how you take medicines. And we take a lot of medications, either over the counter, we buy them from the market, we buy them from the pharmacy, we get them from the hospital. So if you don't have this quality assurance measure in place, then we're actually at some point having more risk than the benefit.
You talked about the consequences of a poor pharmacovigilance system on several persons several decades ago, notably on the global scene. On the African continent, what has been the impact of the fact that the pharmacovigilance system of the African countries are weak on the people, on the health of the people?
Well, so the impact, we can deduce it from projections. Reason being that a lot of the things on the African continent are not properly documented. So if it was properly documented, I'll be able to tell you, I can sit here and tell you that in Cameroon, how many people do we have that have had a serious reaction to penicillin? We'll have it documented, and I'll be able to tell you. Hypersensitivity reactions from penicillin, which are known to kill some patients. And I'm using a very common drug because everybody knows what penicillins are in Cameroon. penicillins have side effects. You have hypersensitivity reactions that some patients have died from it. Do we have that kind of data? We don't have that kind of data in most of the African countries on the different medications that they use. And so it's very weak, and so I cannot sit here and be able to project the impact. But I can tell you what it seems like from countries that collect good information, that it's probably looking very bad in terms of the fact that, well, you cannot pick up your counterfeit drugs. Well, you don't have data on what happens when you have side effects on medications. We don't even report them. We don't document them. So how are you going to tell the impact of it? It's going to be very difficult to tell the impact. We can only project what the impact is.
Professor, you have been working for several years in many African countries in the area of academia and public health programs. What is the problem? Why is it that African countries have been unable for these years, for these decades, to establish strong pharmaceutical systems? Is it a problem of policy? Is it a problem of lack of adequate financial means and human resource?
Well, all of that, all of what you just mentioned is the answer. And so it starts with the leadership in the country. When I say leadership, it usually would involve how is the health actually structured. Now, there was a meeting in 2001 in Abuja. They call it the Abuja Declaration. All the African countries got together and said they agreed that they were going to contribute 15% of the national budget to health. But most of them are lingering around 4%, 5%. This is almost like 20 years ago. And so it's under-resourced in terms of the funding, it's under-resourced in terms of the human resources, and then we don't have the proper will to be able to make these changes. And I will also tell you a small point about it, is the fact that in Africa we don't have a lot of litigation. In the US there's a lot of litigation. And so if somebody was to die in the US because of a side effect, the lawyers are ready to take you to court. We don't have that in most of the African countries. And so all of these things contribute to the fact that we have the medication use process on the continent is extremely weak. The quality assurance is not there. We don't even have a lot of ways to continuously measure the outputs and the outcomes of treatment interventions that we carry on in even well-designed hospitals. We don't have that kind of quality assurance. In the US, for example, hospitals are accredited. The people who accredit hospitals, they come to the hospital, they look at how the hospital runs, they look at how your medication is used, they look at how you prevent medication errors, which is a major problem. They look at your pharmacovigilance program. All of that is put into place, and then you are accredited for the next 3 years to continue practicing. Now, I've hardly seen any African countries that functions at that level.
All right. What is required, what is needed for African countries to establish strong pharmacovigilance systems?
Well, the WHO is, with all due respect, WHO has now, by this time, they're in all the African countries introducing pharmacovigilance. I have interacted with the level of WHO pharmacovigilance program. I have done a lot of training on training individuals on pharmacovigilance. So that sensitization, that awareness to make sure that they know it's an important component, that is already completed, I would say. They know about it. So I think the next phase now is to have the government have the willpower, the leadership to be able to understand that this is for the population, this is for quality of care for the population, and be able to begin to put systems in place. This is also going to require that they begin to look at what is being allocated to healthcare, and also get to the point of asking patients to begin to ask questions from your pharmacists, from your doctors. We understand that most of them, when they go to the hospital, there are just too many patients for a few doctors, and so they don't have time. But it's the right of the patient to understand, number one, what medication are you giving me? What side effects is it going to have? And If you develop side effects, you should be able to call the doctor back and say, I have side effects. But if the systems are not in place, what is the doctor going to do? Probably not say anything. Normally, you're supposed to document the side effect and be able to say, do you think this is a side effect or adverse reaction that is coming from the drug? Send it to your Ministry of Health that is supposed to tally it and be able to say, in the last year we had X number of side effects from insulin, for example. And then you're able to determine that this particular insulin has given us a lot of side effects. Maybe we shouldn't be buying from this manufacturer. Or you write to them to justify why are we having these side effects. And by the way, in the US, that's what pharmacovigilance does. A drug gets approved into the market, people report too many side effects that are very serious. The FDA in the US calls the manufacturer and say, we want you to pull the drug off the market because it's showing that a lot of people are dying from liver toxicity, for example. Now, if liver toxicity was to happen in African countries, they probably will not be able to pick it up because they don't have pharmacovigilance. They will have to wait for the US to tell them that, oh, we're having problems with liver toxicity. Then they will say, oh, okay, so we're also going to withdraw the drug. But it shouldn't be working that way.
Professor Henry Fomundam, one of the great Cameroonian minds in the diaspora, a pharmaceutical care and public health expert with several years of experience working in many African countries in the areas of academia and public health programs. Thanks, Professor, for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. That's it for today.